Barely 25 years after women gained the right to vote, young women and girls were called to play ball at some of the most competitive rinks there is. They came from all over the country, from big cities and small towns, farms, and areas of industry. They were forced to follow a strict system that required them to wear skirts and lipstick while playing. Despite the bad circumstances, these women didn't give up. They showed other women at the time that they could do more than cook and clean. That they would eventually inspire more female sports corporations in the future. The league, of course, was the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. During World War II, men all across America were sent overseas to help fight in the war. Because of this, many professional athletes were forced to do the same thing. It wasn't until 1943 when the owner of the Chicago Cubs, Philip K. Wrigley, proposed an All-American Girls Professional Baseball League to keep baseball going. It was originally supposed to be a softball league, but right before the 1943 season, it was changed to baseball to be unique from other softball leagues in the area. Wrigley, being an avid businessman, believed the league had potential to be a long-lasting sport, but in order to gain public acceptance, women in the league will have to display highest ideals of womanhood. The league lasted from 1943 to 1954 and eventually would draw more than 1 million fans to ballparks. At the league's peak, there were 13 teams competing, such as Rockford Peaches, the Racine Bells, and the South Bend Blue Sox. Players were baseball hungry, and when the girls played, spectators were shocked that these women could play ball just as well as men. Little did anyone know that the small league would impact the whole country in later years. The AAGPBL eventually led to other important movements to advance women's athletics such as Title IX and the WNBA. For that reason, the league is a frontier in women's history and should be recognized by the public as a major movement in our society. The All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, or AAGPBL, did not set out to be a frontier in history. In fact, the league was only developed because of the war. The attendance to games was low at first, and the players were forced to wear skirts. However, many years later, movements to help increase women's athletics were inspired by the league, and many women's sports leagues were created as an inspiration by it, therefore making it a frontier in history. If it wasn't for the AAGPBL increasing exposure to women's athletics, perhaps important movements such as Title IX would have never happened. During the league's later years, the public's mind began to change. Now, attendance was high, and it seemed as though women's sports was a good idea after all. Not only did the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League provide an important precedent for later efforts to promote women's sports, it also exposed players to new cities, new social networks, and gave many financial freedoms. These experiences opened a new world to many of the league's players. Many went on to pursue higher education and professional careers in areas such as medicine and law. In fact, the amount of women earning degrees went up 8.2% to 16% before and after the AAGPBL. While the league offered many opportunities that women had never had before, it came at a cost. Every woman in the league was forced to look, act, and dress in a specific way. In fact, some weren't even allowed in the league because of their physical appearance. Every ball player was even given a manual about how to do things such as look better, feel better, and be more popular. A sample of advice in the book is what to include in your All-American Girls Professional Baseball League beauty kit. One should include cleansing cream, lipstick, Rogue Medium, cream deodorant, face powder, hand lotion, and even hair remover. Even worse were the uniforms that the players were forced to wear. Can you imagine wearing a skirt while playing baseball? Mr. Wrigley required the skirts because this added to the showmanship of the league. From the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League rulebook, it states, the more feminine the appearance of the performer, the more dramatic her performance. In MLB, the players wore special baseball sliding pants to protect themselves. However, in AAGPBL, they slide with nothing between the dirt and their bare legs. This would cause severe scrapes called strawberries, and in the words of the player, Sarah Jane Sands, you either played in that uniform or you went home, and I sure heck wasn't about to go home. From a bird's eye view, we can see how the league advanced the role of women play in our society, all while being forced to uphold the traditional and sexist standards. Men who played baseball were never concerned with their looks, their behavior, or their uniforms. Women, on the other hand, had to fight to be the best ball players they could be while all being forced to uphold ladylike standards. Despite this, Wrigley's brainchild had worked. Every year, the league was getting more and more popular, and fans all over the country were coming to these small towns just to see the girls play. One manager even admitted that during the league's peak, some towns drew over 4 times their population. If the New York Yankees did that, they would have more than 32 million fans per game. The women had never experienced things like this before. They were used to doing nothing more than cooking and taking care of children. Not only that, but in 1947, the league had spring training overseas. All 10 teams were scheduled to travel to Havana, Cuba, for their spring training season. There was also a Cuban women's baseball team, so the All-American girls were exposed to new cultures and people. 1947, being the same year Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball, the AAGPBL decided to let some Cuban players into their league, having previously restricted other races. This led up to 1949, the league's most successful year. During this season, the attendance reached nearly 1 million fans. This time soon ended when MLB players returned after war. The attendance began to decline. Finally, in 1954, the league was officially disabled. However, many years later, it will be recognized by the public as an important milestone to women's success. For example, in 2006, Effa Manley became the first woman to be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. Many more would later follow. In 1992, a movie titled A League of Their Own was based on the AAGPBL. Although the AAGPBL teams were located all over the Midwest, the foundation process was very local. Philip K. Wrigley, in fact, was the owner of the Chicago Cubs, and trials were held in Wrigley Field, a professional Chicago MLB stadium. In the league's later years, a team developed called the Chicago Colleens, which were made playing from 1948 to 1951. Furthermore, despite the somewhat racist and sexist standards that the women in the league were forced to follow, the AAGPBL was a stepping stone to success for women in sports. It was a life-changing experience for many of the women and encouraged them to pursue their dreams in higher education and sports careers.